When I first learned I had cancer, I was worried about my daughters and what life would be like for them. What they wondered who I was, what they wondered what I thought, what they yearned for my approval, my discipline, my love. So I reached out to 6 men from all passages of my life, and I asked them to be present to the passages of my daughters' lives. I called this group of men the Council of Dads. And I asked each of them to embody a different life lesson for my girls. The men ended up being Ben, my oldest buddy. Ben.
And I met Bruce back in 1971 in kindergarten. I would want the girls, to remember where they came from and remember their childhood, because I think it's going to shape the way they are the rest of their lives.
Jeff, my camp counselor.
I'm not likely to sit down and tell the girls what they should do in life, but instead would be honored to drag them on some of my adventures.
Max, my college roommate.
There's not one piece of advice, it's just too much of it. But really to live life to its fullest like their dad. And if they can duplicate that, they're going to be happy campers.
David, my business partner.
I would tell the girlies to always make sure that they dream, to know that they have the ability to do what they set out to do. And if they find obstacles in their way, there's always a way to go beyond it, around it, over it, or through it.
Another Ben, my closest confidant.
The key in life is to live the questions. It's an abstract idea, but it means that if you ask questions, you're never lost. If you ask questions, you find deeper meaning in the world.
And Joshua, romantic poet friend.
It was an overwhelming, emotional moment. There's very few times in your life where anybody will ask you to do anything as significant as what Bruce asks each of us to do with the council.
Great. Well, this is, from our standpoint, just an amazing story of courage and commitment to one's family. When we first heard about Bruce's book, Council of Dads, one of the first connections that came to mind for us was how it applied to military families. And Bruce will tell you a little more about sort of his story, I'm sure, when he comes up. So I don't want to take all of his thunder. But with military dads, what group other than those, really deals with the kind of separation that you can have from your kids? And when you think about, the fact that this group of dads, almost on a daily basis, has to think about the fact that they may have to pay the ultimate sacrifice and not be there for their kids. And so from our perspective, what Bruce has done is just an amazing model. And we were just so delighted with this model that we actually added it to a resource that we've developed for the military called our Deployed Fathers and Families Guide. And this is a resource that we developed for the military several years ago, which is really a step-by-step guide to really augment some of the resources that the military provides to really help a dad with pre-deployment, staying connected while he's deployed, and then also reconnecting, and specifically from a dad perspective. So we are privileged tonight to honor Bruce with a Fatherhood Award because what his story shows is it's not just one man trying to find a replacement for himself, which is probably in some ways an impossible task, but it also shows how irreplaceable good dads are. And we're just pleased because it's such a wonderful example, and CNN's going to be featuring his story, and also Fox News as we lead up into Father's Day. So you'll need to be watching to learn more about Bruce's story and just how this is just growing just over the weeks. Every time I get a new press release of something, it talks about how Bruce has talked to this group or that group, and more people are catching on to this idea. So for his commitment to family and his support for military families, with his Council of Dad Vision, we're honored to present Bruce a 2010 Fatherhood Award.
Thank you, Roland, and what a wonderful occasion. I'm honored to be here in support of this wonderful event, and I'm delighted by this award, although I'm a little bit concerned that it's not going to help me where I need it most. Just this morning, I said to my now 5-year-old identical twin daughters, "You better brush your teeth now, because I am the father of the year." You can imagine how far that got me. I grew up in a family that's very connected to the military. My father was in the Navy. I grew up about a few miles from an air base, and my family now, for 3 generations, has built military housing at Fort Stewart down in Hinesville, Georgia. So I'm especially honored to be here today because there is certainly not an institution in America that better embodies the values of camaraderie and community and teamwork more than the U.S. military. And I think what is the idea that is at the heart of the Council of Dads is that community can be a very powerful thing when raising children. And that what I have found in my own life is that we have our work and we have our family, but somehow friends get pushed aside. There's almost something that conspires against friendship in the culture we live in today. And what the Council of Dads has proven to be about is building a bridge between your family and your friends, to build a new community with your kids at the heart. And as you've just heard from the men in my Council of Dads there who were gathered over the period of a few months, a few years ago when I first was diagnosed with cancer, and essentially what happened was when I first had this idea, I didn't want to tell my wife. I thought we should focus on the positive and live in the moment. But the next day I told her, and she loved the idea, but she quickly started rejecting my nominees. She said, "Well, I love him, but I would never ask him for advice." So starting a council proved to be a very efficient way to find out what my wife really thought of my friends. But we've ended up with this group of people, and then I sat down with each of them and I asked them to play this role for my girls, as you heard, and what is the one piece of advice you would give to my children? And their advice was so moving to me that it inspired me to write this book, The Council of Dads, which gathers this sort of life lessons in one place for my girls and for anybody else who might like to come along. And before I step down and we go on to the main event of today's event, I just wanted to tell you sort of one piece of advice that's gathered in this, because I was inspired hearing Lee's song earlier, that you're going to miss this. And it comes from what happened to me. For a year and a half, I was on crutches, and then for 6 months, I was on a cane. And we saw an image earlier in the video about an injured military personnel. And the chief consequence of being on crutches is that you walk slower. Every step becomes a necessary step. And here's what I learned. You hurry, you get where you're going, but you get there alone. You go slow, you get there where you're going, but you get there with this community you've built along the way. In Paris, 200 years ago, a new type of pedestrian appeared. He was called a flaneur, one who wandered the arcades. And it was the fashion among flaneurs to take a turtle for a walk and let the reptile set the pace. I love this ode to slow moving, and it became my motto for my girls. Take a walk with a turtle. Behold the world in pause. So as I join in this wonderful event, thank you, the National Fatherhood Initiative, for this honor, and congratulate you. Let me just say, if you are a parent, if you ever feel overwhelmed, or if perhaps you've experienced a loss, I can stand here today, now having beaten my cancer, but with this community around me, and I say, I hope you come on this journey with me, because I think you'll be transformed by the wisdom you hear from these guys. I think that you'll be moved to reach out to your friends. And in the end, I hope you'll be inspired by what we all feel in the Council of Dads, and that is a feeling of security, a feeling of togetherness, and ultimately a feeling of life. Thank you very much.